The riverside is great too. There's plenty to see and do.
If you're in Korea, you can't miss the night view full of dazzling lights.
Yes, even the same place can have a totally different vibe at night.
Want to make unforgettable memories?
How about traveling to all corners of Korea? Join us next time to explore more about Korean culture.
Global heritage will unite. We share brilliant values and honor the world's most cherished legacies to pass our heritage on to future generations. Busan invites you, the 48th session of UNESCO World Heritage Committee, July 2026, Busan, Korea.
In our headlines on this Monday, February 23rd, here in South Korea, President Lee Jae-myung hosts his Brazilian counterpart Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva here in Seoul for summit talks today, with particular focus on trade, technology and defense. And relevant authorities here continue to hold meetings in response to the Trump administration's pledge to maintain its tariff pressure on U.S. trade partners, despite the Supreme Court's ruling against most tariffs. Meanwhile, in North Korea, the ruling Workers' Party reportedly re-elects Kim Jong-un as its general secretary this past weekend during an ongoing Congress that takes place every 5 years. We start today with coverage of the summit talks between South Korea and Brazil here in Seoul, where leaders of the two countries agreed to raise bilateral ties to a strategic partnership. Our Blue House correspondent Song Yoo-jin starts us off.
President Lee Jae-myung welcomed Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva to the Blue House on Monday with a warm embrace, reflecting their close personal rapport. Both leaders rose from humble beginnings, having worked as child laborers. Lula's three-day state visit, his first to South Korea in 21 years in what is his third term, began Sunday at Lee's invitation. The summit, their second meeting, opened with a lavish welcoming ceremony with Lula's motorcade escorted by honor guards and a traditional Korean marching band. President Lee and First Lady Kim Hae-kyung greeted the Brazilian first couple wearing outfits in blue, green, and yellow, the colors of Brazil's national flag. The two leaders agreed to elevate South Korea and Brazil's almost 7-decade-long diplomatic ties to a strategic partnership and adopt a 4-year action plan.
또한 식량 안보, 중소기업, 과학기술, 보건의료, 핵심 광물, 에너지 전환, 환경, 우주, 문화에 이르기까지 우리 양국은 광범위한 분야로 양자 협력을 제도화해 나갈 것입니다.
I am very pleased to establish this strategic partnership. The 2026 to 2029 Action Plan will serve as an important roadmap for strengthening cooperation between our two countries.
Economic cooperation was at the center of the talks. Trade between the two countries has exceeded $10 billion annually for the past 5 years, with Brazil serving as South Korea's largest trading partner and investment destination in South America. To continue this momentum, LULA reaffirmed the importance of striking a trade agreement between South Korea and the Mercosur bloc of South American countries.
저는 한국과 남미 공동시장 간 무역협정 체결을 위한 협상을 조속히 재개할 필요가 있다는 점을 설명드렸고, 룰라 대통령께서도 무역협정 체결이 기묘한 과제라는 점에 깊이 공감하셨습니다.
South Korea is Brazil's fourth largest trade partner in Asia. There remains significant untapped potential between our countries. And we agreed to explore ways to resume negotiations suspended since 2021.
The summit was followed by the signing of 10 memorandums of understanding covering trade, technology, agriculture, and transnational crime. President Lula invited President Yi to the In Defense of Democracy Summit in Spain this April, as well as to Brazil in the near future. With both leaders showing a strong will to deepen ties, a third summit between the two appears very likely. 송유진, Arirang News.
Over in the U.S., the Trump administration has been quick to respond to the recent Supreme Court ruling against most of its tariffs on U.S. trade partners, including South Korea. Our Oh Soo-young has the latest.
The United States says its trading partners want to keep existing trade agreements in place, even after the Supreme Court struck down President Donald Trump's reciprocal tariffs. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told CNN on Sunday that Washington's counterparts want to maintain previously concluded trade deals. He stressed that the court ruling only blocked tariffs imposed under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, adding that the president still has other authorities. Trump has already moved to use them. On Friday, he triggered a never-before-used Section 122 of the 1974 Trade Act, imposing a 10% global tariff. 1 day later, he said the rate would rise to 15%, the maximum allowed under the law. He also said new legally permissible tariffs would be announced within months. Section 122 allows tariffs of up to 15% for 150 days to address balance of payment concerns. Any extension requires congressional approval. Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act, meanwhile, allows tariffs on national security grounds and has previously been used on steel and automobiles. The administration is also eyeing Section 301 of the Trade Act, which introduces tariffs after investigations into unfair or discriminatory trade practices. In Seoul, the ruling Democratic Party, the government, and the Office of the President held a closed-door meeting. According to Democratic Party floor spokesperson Moon Gum-ju, participants agreed that the swift passage of the Special Act on Investment in the United States is in the national interest. They pledged to process the bill by March 9th, as agreed by both ruling and opposition parties. Officials also shared concerns that Washington could invoke Section 301 and other trade measures and agreed to refrain from hasty countermeasures.
I would say governments around the region will try to stay competitive in the U.S. market, avoid becoming the targets of the latest rounds of tariff, and position themselves as alternative manufacturing bases when supply chains shift. So you might see some quiet adjustments, incentives to attract relocated factories, closer monitoring of transshipment, and also more trade diplomacy, but not open bargaining power plays, because that is, frankly, not how Asian countries work, right?
Meanwhile, U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer signaled that enforcement will intensify. He told media that investigations have been launched into Brazil and China under Section 301. He added that Washington will probe excess production capacity in several Asian countries, saying some produce more than they consume and distort global markets. Greer also said that the Supreme Court ruling would not affect the upcoming U.S.-China summit, scheduled for late March or early April. 오수영, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, here in South Korea, relevant authorities sat down for more talks on this Monday amid fresh tensions over tariffs between the Trump administration and the U.S. Supreme Court. Our Kim Jun-hong covers these talks.
With uncertainty mounting after U.S. President Donald Trump imposed new 15% tariffs, South Korea's Industry Minister Kim Jong-un acknowledged the risks while reaffirming his commitment to friendly consultations with Washington.
Despite the U.S. Supreme Court blocking tariffs under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, Washington is expected to pursue its tariff policy through other means, adding to global trade uncertainty.
His remarks came during an emergency public-private meeting held on Monday by the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Resources in response to Saturday's U.S. Supreme Court ruling on, quote, reciprocal tariffs and additional U.S. measures. Despite the uncertainty, Kim pledged continued engagement with Washington to uphold the bilateral tariff agreement.
We will keep a close watch on any further U.S. tariff actions and developments among other major economies while steadily preparing our response.
Experts note that such a cautious approach underscores the structural constraints Seoul faces in responding to U.S. trade actions.
Section 301 of the Trade Act, often called Super 301, is a powerful instrument that allows the president to retaliate against what he considers problematic, since Washington can act whenever it deems something is unfair. Avoiding provocation and preserving the current framework may not be ideal, but appears to be the next best option for now.
With Washington pressing ahead with alternative trade tools, Seoul now faces the challenge of managing uncertainty while preserving room for negotiation. Kim Jun-hong, Arirang News.
North Korea's Kim Jong-un has reportedly been re-elected to head the ruling Workers' Party. Our correspondent Kim Bo-kyung covers the re-election and more.
North Korea's top leader Kim Jong-un has been unanimously reappointed as the ruling Workers' Party of Korea's General Secretary on the fourth day of the 9th Party Congress, according to the Korean Central News Agency on Monday. Under the party's regulations, the party needs to elect its General Secretary, the one to represent and lead the entire party every 5 years. The Congress hailed Kim for building revolutionary armed forces capable of responding to any threat of aggression and fully preparing for any war, saying the regime's war deterrence centering on its nuclear forces has been significantly strengthened despite severe challenges. One expert said Kim's reappointment to the position underlines how Kim successfully managed the crises that were caused by an unexpected pandemic and stabilized the regime.
After overcoming the crises highlighted at the 8th Party Congress and achieving major results, the leadership is declaring a shift to a more stable, long-term governing system. While maintaining its stance on strengthening its nuclear capabilities, it is now placing greater emphasis on economic growth and improving living standards, aiming for new achievements not seen in previous times.
The state-run media also reported that the Congress adopted revised party rules on Sunday, though no particular details or whether the hostile two-state policy toward South Korea was formally codified.
Up to the fourth day of coverage, the key points are very few external messages, limited details about the meeting, and some party personnel changes.
As the Congress has not yet concluded, and with the party expected to adopt a decision outlining new policy directions for the next 5 years, the spokesperson added that it remains to be seen whether any messages toward the South or the United States will be issued. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, on the broader international front, Iran's top diplomat has shared cautious optimism about planned nuclear talks this week in Geneva with the U.S., while warning against U.S. military aggression. Our Park Gun-woo has details.
The U.S. and Iran are set to resume nuclear talks in Geneva on Thursday, following a previous round of negotiations that ended last week. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said in an interview with CBS on Sunday that there's a good chance of reaching a diplomatic solution on the nuclear issue that accommodates the interests of both sides. The minister warned that if the U.S. were to launch an attack, Iran has the option of targeting U.S. military bases in the region, adding that U.S. military pressure would not force Iran to make concessions. Arakchi also reiterated that uranium enrichment is Iran's sovereign right, saying the country has earned it through decades of effort and sacrifice. The upcoming talks were also confirmed on Sunday by Oman's foreign minister, whose country has been mediating indirect talks between Washington and Tehran, expressing hope for a positive push to go the extra mile toward finalizing a deal. Shortly afterward, Iranian President Massoud Pezeshkian wrote on social media that recent negotiations included the exchange of practical proposals and produced encouraging signals. However, he added that Iran continues to closely monitor U.S. actions and has made all necessary preparations for any potential scenario. The remarks come as tensions escalate, with Washington boosting its military presence near Iran and President Donald Trump warning of really bad things if no nuclear agreement is reached. Trump's warning echoed remarks made Sunday by a special envoy.
But it's curious. He's curious as to why they haven't, I don't want to use the word capitulated, but why they haven't capitulated. Why under this sort of pressure with the amount of sea power, naval power that we have over there.
With tensions still high and negotiations approaching, attention is now on whether the two countries can achieve a breakthrough. Park Gon-woo, Arirang News.
In other news now, pundits have been calling for a legal framework to promote worker empowerment amid the growing adoption of physical AI in the workplace. Now, given this reality, our Kim Do-yeon spoke to lawmakers here.
As the prospect of robots replacing human labor becomes reality with physical AI's recent rapid advancement, the political world has begun debating the subject. President Lee Jae-myung referenced the Luddites in 19th century to suggest you can't stand in the way of progress.
그 기계 파괴 운동이라고 사람들이 일자리를 뺀다고 기계 부수자 이런 운동이 있었잖아요. 근데 그 흘러오는 거대한 수레를 피할 수 없습니다. 결국 그 사회에 빨리 적응해야죠. 기술을 익히고 그걸 증기기관 기계를 통제하는, 조정하는 또는 만들어내는 수리하는 이런 기능이 또 필요하잖아요.
Consulting firm McKinsey forecasts that by 2030, 800 million jobs will be gone due to AI, and South Korea is at the heart of it, with the highest robot density in the world last year. And for a lawmaker who represents Ulsan, often known as the industrial capital of South Korea, where heavy industries and auto plants make up the city's economy, the reality is coming fast.
If we simply resist this change, the outcome is clear. Companies will move overseas, jobs will vanish, and the very foundation of Korean manufacturing will collapse, dragging the entire economy down with it.
Meanwhile, lawmaker Choi Eun-seok has proposed a soft landing bill to complement South Korea's existing AI Basic Act.
We must prioritize education and retraining. By helping our workers adapt to new, complex roles in this evolving landscape, we can ensure no one is left behind in the transition.
While at early stages of talks, lawmakers are also looking at ways to make sure everybody directly benefits from physical AI and ease the concerns over job losses.
Instead of corporate ownership, imagine a citizen-funded model where profits from robot labor are redistributed back to the people. In the long run, implementing a robot tax or automation tax will be an inevitable necessity.
Most importantly, both lawmakers call for a unified national dialogue. They see this not just as a challenge, but as an opportunity for South Korea to lead the world in balancing innovation with labor.
As the AI era arrives, we must proactively address how it will reshape our labor and daily lives. Now is the time to pool our wisdom to ensure that human value isn't lost in the age of machines.
Now, with the transition to AI seemingly inevitable, the world is watching to see if business, labor, and both sides of the aisle can come together to set a new global standard for the future. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Also here on the local front, the Culture Ministry is launching 2 initiatives to nurture young talent. Under the K-Art Youth Creator Support Program, project that is up to 3,000 artists and writers. Age 39 and younger are eligible for 9 million won, or some $6,200 each, in support of their work in fields such as literature, visual, as well as performing arts. The ministry has also launched a Youth K-Culture Global Frontier initiative to fund institutions to send young Koreans abroad to promote Korean culture. Selected institutions can receive up to 59 million won, or around $41,000, to cover expenses such as airfare, accommodation and program costs for participants to some 30 countries. The 2026 Winter Olympics came to a close in Italy this past weekend, with South Korea securing its target of 3 gold medals, driven by success in short track. Our Lee Seung-jae has the highlights.
South Korea has achieved its goal at the Milan Cortina Winter Olympics, securing 3 gold medals thanks to a strong lead push from its short track speed skating team. The country also finished the games with 4 silvers and 3 bronzes. That meets the target set by the Korean Sport and Olympic Committee, which had aimed to win at least 1 more gold than at the 2022 Beijing Winter Games, where South Korea collected 2 golds, 5 silvers, and 2 bronzes. The decisive 3rd gold came Friday night when short track skater Kim Gi-lee captured the women's 1,500-meter title, edging out teammate Chae Min-jung. Earlier that day, the men's 5,000-meter relay team added a silver medal to the tally. Once again, short track skaters carried the medal campaign. They accounted for 2 golds, 3 silvers, and 2 bronzes, proof of the sport being South Korea's most reliable Winter Olympic discipline. Kim Gi-lee stood out as the only South Korean athlete to win multiple gold medals in Milan Cortina. On Sunday, she was named the most valuable player of the South Korean delegation.
There were many truly difficult moments, but thanks to everyone who supported me, I was able to endure them, and I will continue to grow into an even better athlete in the future.
The Korean Sport and Olympic Committee said she was voted MVP by South Korean journalists covering the games. The committee has presented the award to top-performing athletes at major multi-sport events since the 2023 Hangzhou Asian Games. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you everything you need to know from around the globe. U.S. Secret Service agents shot and killed an armed man after he breached the secured perimeter of President Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort. Authorities say the incident happened at about 1:30 a.m. Sunday when a man drove through the resort's north gate as another vehicle was exiting. He was reportedly carrying a shotgun and a gas can. When Secret Service agents and a Palm Beach County sheriff ordered him to drop the items, he raised the shotgun into a firing position and was then shot dead. President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania Trump were at the White House in Washington at the time. Investigators have identified the intruder as 21-year-old Austin Tucker Martin from North Carolina and says his family had reported him missing days earlier and believe he traveled south before obtaining the weapon. A box for the shotgun was later found inside his vehicle. The FBI is leading the investigation and says it is compiling a psychological profile, and officials say they have not determined a motive. A Mexican military operation has killed cartel leader Nemesio Oseguera, known as El Mencho, marking one of the most significant cartel takedowns in years. Mexico's defense ministry says troops engaged Oseguera in a shootout in Jalisco state on Sunday, critically wounded him, and he died during an air transfer to Mexico City. Oseguera led the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, a powerful organization that expanded into an international trafficking network and moved cocaine and fentanyl into the United States. The operation triggered immediate retaliation. Gunmen torched vehicles and blocked highways across at least 6 states. Jalisco Governor Pablo Lemus Navarro urged residents to remain indoors. The U.S. Embassy advised American citizens to shelter in place, and major airlines canceled flights to the region. Greenland Prime Minister Jens Frederik Nielsen on Sunday rejected President Donald Trump's proposal to send a U.S. hospital ship to the Arctic territory. Trump had posted on Truth Social that, quote, many people in Greenland are sick and that a boat with medical supplies would be dispatched to take care of them. Nielsen said Greenland provides free public health care to its citizens and does not need outside medical assistance. He urged Washington to engage through dialogue rather than social media announcements. Pope Leo issued a plea for an immediate ceasefire in Ukraine during his Angelus address on Sunday, marking the 4th anniversary of the Russian invasion. Speaking to thousands in St. Peter's Square, the pontiff declared that, quote, peace cannot be postponed and demanded an end to the shattering of lives and families. With casualty figures now exceeding 1.8 million across both sides since 2022, the Pope urged global leaders to translate dialogue into responsible decisions to end the destruction. Chu Ji-han, Arirang News.
After the weekend's mild weather, temperatures dropped rapidly today. But the bigger concern remains wildfire danger. Dry advisories continue to expand across eastern parts of Korea. So even a small spark could quickly turn into a large fire. Adding to the concern, yellow dust has covered many regions. Meanwhile, relief will arrive tomorrow morning as rain and snow move in nationwide. Inland areas of the Gyeongsangdo province could see more than 10 centimeters of heavy snowfall, but the rest of the country will see rain instead, with Jeju Island forecast to see up to 80 millimeters. Then tomorrow morning, we are waking up to freezing temperatures at -1 degree here in Seoul and Daejeon. Then by the afternoon, Seoul gets up to 6 degrees. Daegu just tops out at 5. And once the rain system moves out by Wednesday, we will wrap up the month with milder conditions. With that in mind, here's a look at the international weather conditions.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up right after this break is our daily panel session, during which we touch upon U.S. tariffs, summit talks, and more. Do stay with us.
How to survive in Korea. Workplace. Step 1. Lunchtime. The most important morning routine is to check today's menu. Food is essential for survival. Memorize today's menu. The highlight of office life. Lunchtime. Rice in the bottom left, soup in the bottom right. The top is for the sides. The sauce and the spoon go here. This is the basic layout, but it's a bit odd to switch rice and soup. When you're done, pour the leftovers into the soup bowl. It doesn't look that appetizing, so wait until others are done eating. Step 2. Neng, nep, nenep. These are the most used expressions at work. Choose the most appropriate form. Neng, nep, nenep. Remember that the formal ne can sound a bit stiff. Did you just say yes? Absolutely not acceptable. You want to find the right word for the right occasion. Step 3. Desteria. Desteria is the oasis in the desert. Show them your character. If you're not the diligent type, get a stookie plant. Work is tough. Laugh and the whole world laughs with you. Weep and you weep alone. Stay put, like the stookie that survives in the desert. Hang in there until the end. Of course, you can always quit. You matter more than anything else. Step 4. Survival kit. Every worker needs a survival kit. Survival kit level 1. This position gets the most exposure. Grab one when you need a sugar boost. Always keep a few treats you can offer your co-workers. Survival kit level 2. These are for hunger pangs before and after a meal. You'll need them when you take a coffee break with your office buddies. Survival kit level 3. Trash talking your boss with your soulmate. Did you survive in the workplace? Office romance? Be careful. Even the photocopier knows all the gossip.
drawing more fans from all over the world. Local consumer prices continue to hover at the 2% cent rate in April. Turning to robots to allow the visually impaired the chance to better indulge in cultural experiences. Like the number of hybrid cars are registered in South Korea has surpassed 2 million with this locally developed Yuri rocket.
Arirang.
On Press Perspective today, we touch upon the U.S. Supreme Court's recent ruling against U.S. tariffs, and Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva becomes the first Brazilian leader to travel to South Korea on a state visit in over 2 decades. Hello and welcome. You're watching Press Perspective for this Monday, February 23rd here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. U.S. tariffs and summit talks between South Korea and Brazil are some of the issues that we will address today. For more on this, I have Fabian Kretschmer with German press agency DPA here in the studio. Fabian, as always, welcome.
Hello.
I also have Professor Park Won-gon at Ewha Women's University joining our talk virtually. Professor Park, as always, it's a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Right, we shall start here in the studio. Fabian, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that Donald Trump's reciprocal tariffs on South Korea and other countries are unlawful. Should we start with this particular ruling? What exactly did the court decide, and what are the immediate implications?
Yeah, I would say this ruling is by far the most important, at least during Trump's second presidency so far. The court has decided that most of Trump's tariffs are illegal. They are basically, the court invalidated those tariffs. Why? How did the court argue? It said that you need basically approval by Congress. So what Trump did, he exceeded his presidential power. He abused his power. He decided things that he actually was not allowed to do by law. He was not allowed to impose those very broad tariffs. That has very this is a consequential rulings because, I mean, it's about billions of dollars basically of value that, you know, now has to be decided how it gets repaid back. But I would say many companies are not super happy about the decision, because what businesses need is certainty. They want to plan ahead. They need stability. And once you've already adjusted your supply chain, once you've already moved factories maybe to another country or etc., that costs a lot of time, resources, money, and you don't do this today this way and then tomorrow in another way, so the damage has already been done. Actually, one point I would also like to add is that by this court decision, some countries benefit more than others. And just today, the Financial Times wrote that actually the countries who benefit most from this ruling are Brazil and China, while actually traditional allies of the US, Europe, and also South Korea, Japan, relatively only benefit a little bit from it. And then there's also the big question, how will we proceed? I'm sure we will hear more from that soon. But I mean, Trump has basically said he wants to double down on tariffs and has not indicated that he actually accepts the ruling by the Supreme Court.
Right. And speaking about Mr. Trump, now he has resorted to tariffs as leverage, Professor Park, across a wide range of issues, including security, and has rebuked the court's latest ruling. What action plan do you suppose remains a realistic option for Mr. Trump as we speak?
Well, I think President Trump is very likely to respond by doubling down on linking trade and security, especially when it comes to key U.S. allies. For him, tariffs are not just an economic tool. They are also a way to apply political and security pressure. The countries he focuses on most with the so-called reciprocal tariff are actually America's closest allies and partners. These are the countries that rely heavily on U.S. security guarantees, while at the same time running large trade surpluses with the United States. South Korea, Japan, the European Union, and Taiwan all fit that profile. So even if reciprocal tariffs are ruled illegal by the Supreme Court, I don't think that means the pressure simply disappears. The Trump administration still has plenty of options on table, especially by tying economic issues more closely to security cooperation. If we look specifically at South Korea, Seoul is committed to about $350 billion in investment in the U.S. In return, there have been understandings and discussions on security issues, including nuclear-powered submarines and possible revision to ROK-US nuclear cooperation agreement. In that context, if South Korea were to argue that those understandings no longer apply because the reciprocal tariffs were struck down, the Trump administration could respond by reconsidering or even rolling back security-related agreement. Beyond that, President Trump can also rely more heavily on existing trade laws. Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act allows the U.S. to impose sector-specific tariffs on national security grounds. And even from the South Korean perspective, this means that the best option is to maintain its existing investment commitment and move forward with the special legislation on U.S. investment that Washington is asking for, including passing it through the National Assembly on schedule. That's the most realistic way to manage the pressure going forward.
Right, which was something that was discussed by officials here in the country this past weekend upon the Supreme Court's ruling. Fabian, the U.S. leader, he's set to deliver his State of the Union address on Tuesday evening, U.S. time. What do you believe will be the gist of his address?
Well, I think two messages I'm quite sure he will deliver, because that has been a theme that Trump always delivers during his speeches. Namely, he wants to convey the message that he's the greatest president of the United States in the history of the United States, and that he will also lash out against his enemies. I mean, that's basically his nature. That is what he always does. But more specifically, I think the ruling by the Supreme Court against his tariffs, I think he will address that. He will basically say that Trump will protect the rights of the workers, of U.S. manufacturing, of the U.S. industry with those tariffs. And the judges, he will frame them as unpatriotic and that they constrain him in his agenda. I think that's what he will say. He will also probably lash out against China and other countries, maybe even also traditional allies. Could also be that he will lash out potentially against European countries, against South Korea, and accusing them of cheating the US, or basically taking advantage of US under the current trade system, and that thereby tariffs are necessary. I think he will double down on that, and he will also say that tariffs are necessary to basically make trading partners pay for the benefits that they can enjoy with doing trade with the US. I think this will be the overarching theme of his speech.
Right, and going forward, Professor Park, the U.S. midterm elections are scheduled to take place this November. Keeping this in mind, what do you suppose are the political implications of this ruling by the U.S. Supreme Court, and how might it shape broader global dynamics, do you think?
Well, midterm elections in the United States are always important because they function as kind of a referendum on the sitting administration. Voters often use the midterm to send a message, and historically, they tended to prefer checks and balance rather than giving one party too much power. As a result, it's actually quite common for the president's party to lose seats in Congress during the midterm elections. Many voters want Congress to act as a counterweight to the White House. Of course, outcome can vary depending on local races, specific district dynamics, but the basic pattern is still very strong in American politics. From the administration perspective, winning the midterm is critical, especially when second-term president losing control of Congress can significantly limit what the administration can realistically accomplish during the remaining 2 years in office. That said, the Trump administration doesn't necessarily follow the traditional rules of the Washington politics, as we've been already seen and talked, including in this recent Supreme Court ruling on tariffs. President Trump has been willing to bypass Congress and rely heavily on the executive authority to push his agenda forward. In fact, even though the U.S. and South Korea have a free trade agreement that was ratified by the both legislatures, the Trump administration still imposed what were effectively unilateral tariffs, which may argue infringed on Congress trade authority. So even if Republicans fail to secure a clear majority in midterm election, I don't expect President Trump's America First approach to slow down in any meaningful way. He's likely to continue applying direct pressure on other countries using a wide range of economic and political tools to achieve his objective.
Right then, against the backdrop of Mr. Trump's America First policy, South Korea here is engaging in active diplomacy, if you will. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva is here in South Korea. What has been the foreign media coverage, that is, of this particular visit?
I would say there was already one big soft power moment ahead of the visit. Namely, Lula's wife was posting a picture of herself wearing a hanbok, a traditional Korean dress. That was very warmly received here in South Korea. Actually, a very prominent South Korean politician suggested, we should take this as inspiration to create a hanbok day also in the parliament, and that we, the National Assembly people, should also wear traditional dresses. And I mean, it touched a lot of South Koreans as a form of appreciation. Then one aspect that foreign media pointed out in the meeting between Lula and President Lee Jae-myung is that both actually share a quite interesting chapter in their biography. Both come from extreme poverty, actually. as a child, they were laborers. I mean, Lee Jae-myung worked in a sweatshop, in a factory when he was a very young teenager. President LULA, when he grew up, he was shining shoes. He was also selling peanuts on the streets. I mean, both lived under hard conditions to support their families already early on. And this is kind of also maybe one of the reasons why they bond so well. I would say their political beliefs is not too similar. Both come from a rather like center-left perspective. Their worldview is centered also a lot on social justice. And actually, before LULA arrived here in Seoul, Lee Jae-myung wrote quite a remarkable message on his social media. He said, "I look forward to meeting you soon. Welcome, my eternal comrade, President LULA." That is also quite a strong message. And yeah, when the meeting happened, the body language already revealed quite a lot. I think LULA wanted to give President Lee like a hug and a long handshake, and it was really very warm. In terms of content, yeah, both countries have elevated their bilateral ties to strategic partnership, and I think that's important to establish more political but also economic exchanges. And I think that's also one of the goals by the Brazilian side. I mean, LULA came with a really extensive business delegations. A lot of CEOs were in his entourage, and I think that's also one of the reasons why Brazil wants to seek closer ties to South Korea.
Right, indeed. And Professor Park, what do you suppose is the importance of strategic partnership between South Korea and Brazil amid the current climate of uncertainty with regard to geopolitics and the global economy?
Well, I think a deeper cooperation between South Korea and Brazil at this moment is strategically significant on multiple fronts, economically, diplomatically, and geopolitically. First, let's talk numbers. South Korea and Brazil already have a meaningful economic relationships. In 2025, Brazil's export to South Korea were around $5.47 billion, including key goods like mineral fuels, meat, and coffee. The Korea's export to Brazil remains substantial as well. Historically, trade between the two countries has reached roughly $10 billion in recent years, showing strong growth in trade and service ties. South Korea is one of the Brazil's important partners in Asia, with major Korean companies such as Samsung, Hyundai, and CJ having a strong presence there, and a vibrant Korean community of some 50,000 people living in Brazil. Beyond trade and investment, there is a growing cooperation in areas like digital business, 5G, e-commerce, and even defense industry collaboration following recent MOUs signed last year. Brazil's significance for Korea goes beyond simple commerce. Brazil is widely seen as one of the leading voices of so-called Global South, an influential developing country with deep ties to Latin America, Africa, and increasingly Asia. Strengthening ties with Brazil helps Korea diversify its diplomatic and economic partnership beyond East Asia and the West, which is crucial in an era of heightened geopolitical competition.
Right, for sure. Meanwhile, Fabien, across the border in North Korea, the Workers' Party's 9th Congress, it finally opened. That was last week after the Lunar New Year. I remember we were sitting here talking about when that particular Congress would take place. So what has been shared about this political event thus far?
Yeah, so the event was opened on Thursday by Kim Jong-un giving an opening speech, and the one particular focus that a lot of journalists, put their attention to was that Kim Jong-un displayed a lot of confidence. He delivered a message of optimism, if you will, and of course you could dismiss it and say, okay, it's the ruler of North Korea. Of course he would be very confident and say everything is fine. But no, if you look at the Party Congress 5 years ago, I mean, the Party Congress traditionally takes place every 5 years. During the last one, actually, Kim Jong-un acknowledged a lot of economic problems. And now he's saying, no, a lot of the hardship has been overcome. The economic situation has been transformed, the country. The livelihood has been improved. That is quite remarkable if he says so. And yeah, today he was re-elected as the General Secretary of the Workers' Party. Of course, that was to be expected. But KCNA, the North Korean state media, quoted the Congress report. And in this report, it was also mentioned that one of the reasons why Kim Jong-un is was re-elected is that he not only improved livelihood of the people, but also that under his ruling, the nuclear deterrence was strengthened. strengthened, and that gives you a little bit of a signal where the country is going to. However, a lot of information has been sparse. I mean, a lot of experts want to know more whether Kim Jong-un is positioning his teenage daughter to political succession. Maybe we don't know much more except for some NIS reports, but I think from the party congress there's not so much information. We don't know whether Kim Jong-un is really having some willingness to engage with South Korean President Lee Jae-myung, who really wants to revive inter-Korean relationship. And he also doesn't signal yet whether he wants to engage with U.S. President Donald Trump. Those would be questions that we have to look out for. Maybe we'll find answers by reading KCNA in the coming days and weeks.
Right, maybe. In the meantime, Professor Park, at the end of 2023, North Korea defined cross-border relations as those between two hostile states. Now, many wonder whether this Ninth Party Congress, a Congress that takes place every 5 years, will make public policies that reflect this particular stance. What are your thoughts?
Well, also, Fabian, as Fabian mentioned, the Ninth Party Congress has officially begun, but as of today, there have been no concrete announcement on either South Korea policy or broader foreign policy. What North Korea has said so far is each sector is reviewing and discussing plans based on the goals outlined in Kim Jong-un's work report, and that a formal decision document will be adopted later. That means there is still room for more specific message to come out either through the final resolution or through Kim Jong-un's concluding remarks. That said, I do not expect any fundamental change in North Korea's line towards South Korea. The policy of defining inter-Korean relations as those between two hostile states is almost certainly going to continue. Kim Jong-un already reaffirmed this very closely in his policy speech at the Supreme People's Assembly last September. At the time, he said quite explicitly that North Korea has no intention of sitting down with South Korea or doing anything together, and that it would not engage with South Korea at all. He also stated that North and South Korea are fundamentally different states, separated by the border, and that they can never become one country, adding that this view would be fixed in North Korea's state law. Given those statements, it is highly likely that this party Congress will formally incorporate the two hostile state concept into Workers' Party rules. And after the Congress, when Supreme People's Assembly meets, we can expect this idea to be written in the Constitution.
Right then. Beyond cross-border ties, Fabian, this past weekend, the Japanese government sent a vice minister-level official rather than a cabinet member to a Japanese event aimed at laying claim over South Korea's Tokto Island. Now here, some believe that this is a clear indication of the Takaichi administration's determination to keep Seoul-Tokyo ties on track. Others here in the country keep their fury focused on the false territorial claim. What has been the international interpretation of this move by Japan?
Yeah, for foreign media, I think this is really a litmus test of whether South Korea and Japan can overcome the historical tension. And the answer so far is, well, not really, but maybe a little bit, because as you noticed, it was a vice minister, not a full cabinet member, who went to this event, so that can be seen as a compromise. However, I mean, the Japanese side did make this territorial claim again. I mean, they could have also avoided that. So I think in the eyes of Seoul, this is really quite regretful. And yeah, it's really quite difficult. But I mean, overall, like the international perspective is, or let's say many foreign media don't get too excited about this issue, because for them it's hard to understand why a small island, merely a few rocks, so to speak, is such an important issue. But if you really want to understand it, you have to, of course, know about the historical context. And then it's also understandable why this issue is quite sensitive in South Korea. And yeah, so far I would say that it has been reported in the news as Japan making that claim again. I think it's kind of disappointing, but with a compromise, it was this time only a vice minister, which can be seen as a small step towards Seoul.
Right then. Professor Park, broadly speaking, what are your prospects with regard to Seoul-Tokyo partnership under the Lee and Takaichi administrations, respectively?
Well, even though the new Takaichi administration is often described as hardline or right-leaning, I don't think South Korea-Japan relations are heading in a negative direction right now. In fact, I would say the relationship is relatively stable and in some ways more resilient than people might expect. One important reason for that is shuttle diplomacy. South Korea and Japan are currently maintaining regular face-to-face meetings between their leaders. President Lee Jae-myung and Prime Minister Takaichi have already met several times through the shuttle diplomacy framework, and that matters a lot. And this shuttle diplomacy is not just symbolic, it's a very practical tool for managing the relationship. South Korea-Japan relations have deep-rooted structural issues that are not easy to resolve. Difference over historical interpretation, Japan's territorial claims over Dokdo, and the unresolved issue related to the comfort woman and the forced labor. These are the problems that don't simply disappear with the change of the government. Because of that, the key question is not whether disagreement will arise, but how those disagreements are managed when they do. In that sense, regular leader-level meetings are crucial. Shuttle diplomacy allows both sides to contain friction before it escalates and prevents individual dispute from derailing the entire relationship. At the same time, South Korea and Japan have a strong incentive to cooperate. The most obvious one is the North Korea's nuclear threat. Both countries are directly exposed to it, and effective deterrence and response require close coordination, particularly with the United States. There is also growing overlap in economic and security pressures. Both Seoul and Tokyo are simply exposed to Trump's administration's strategy of linking economic and security issues, using tariff as leverage to push for greater U.S. investment and market access. These shared challenges are pushing South Korea and Japan toward cooperation rather than confrontation, even amid the political shift in Tokyo.
Right, indeed. And on that cautious note of optimism, if you will, we'll have to end today's talk. Professor Park, as always, thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you.
And Fabien here in the studio, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts. Right, on that note, we end this edition of Press Perspective. See you same time tomorrow. Thank you for now.